Hello everyone, it's Joe here from Snakedraft FPL and welcome back to another Draft FPL 24-25 pre-season video. Today we're looking at player position changes. I've got a handful of players here who have had a position change from last season and we're going to look into how that impacts them for the draft game in the upcoming season. If you enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let's get into it. So first up then, we have got Kai Havertz. He has gone from a midfielder last season to a forward this year. All this data on the screen is courtesy of Fantasy Football Hub. There's a link down in the description if you want to sign up for my exclusive pre-season offer with them. They've got loads of data, loads of helpful things, not only for regular FPL but for draft as well. I've currently got him ranked at number 11 in my pre-season draft rankings. Those are currently available on my Patreon. A little bit more about that later on. If we look at Kai's data from last season, 6 points per 90 with expected points data of 5.4 per 90. So he did overperform a little bit, but 5.5 expected points per 90 is not too bad. It's not brilliant, but the one thing he does have is that he plays a lot of minutes, or he certainly did last year. There was a lot of talk about Arsenal signing a forward. I don't personally think it's going to happen. It might do late in the window, but we've not really heard much chatter about it. So as it stands at the moment, I think Arsenal will go into the season with Kai Havertz starting up front. I mean, it served them well last year. He was playing really well from Christmas onwards once he had that kind of role nailed down. So that's what I think is going to happen. Almost a goal every other 90 minutes is not bad, and that was pretty similar to his XG, to be honest. 0.42 XG per 90, 0.44 goals scored per 90. Assists, he got an assist every 3 games effectively, and that was quite a high outperformance. But he did win a few penalties which aren't really covered in that data, and I suspect he'll do that more often. He is actually quite good at drawing in fouls, Kai Havertz, so I wouldn't be surprised if he does get a few more sort of fantasy assists like that as well. Personally, I think the movement from a midfielder to a forward is a big benefit for Havertz and for draft particularly, mainly because there's just so few forwards that are actually good picks. Once you get above about an 8-man league, it gets really difficult. So in my opinion, the more the merrier, and that's pretty much why I've got him ranked so highly. Number 11 is quite a high spot in the rankings, but for me, he's probably the 4th forward behind Haaland, Watkins and Isak. So from that sense, it's really good to get one of those big hitting forwards early, and I think that is why this is a good move for Kai to go into the forward position. Next up, we have got Richarlison doing exactly the same thing from a midfielder to a forward. His data was actually a lot better than I expected, per 90 data anyway, better than Havertz's pretty much across the board. 7.36 points per 90 with an expected points of 6.72, so it's a little bit of an overperformance. He scored 0.66 goals per 90, which is really good, from an XG of 0.57 per 90, which is also strong. Assists were not really much of his repertoire. He did overperform a little bit on the assists, expected of 0.09, and he actually realised 0.24. So did it overperform in the assists a little bit, overperform the goals a little bit, which surprises me because he's not someone that I would really think of as clinical. But last season did show that he does actually have the potential to score some points. I've been known in the past to always say that he's more likely to get booked than to get an attack in return, and that is still kind of my opinion, but if he's going to play consistently up front for Spurs, he is going to be, you know, a solid pick. There's kind of no doubt about it. The problem is there is quite a lot of competition for places amongst those forward roles for Spurs, so we really need to wait and see from pre-season how they're going to line up. But I do think Richarlison, more likely than not, will be in that starting front 3, and if he is, then he is a very good pick in my opinion. Current draft rank of 23, which is maybe a little bit high, and when I say current draft rankings, these rankings I'm tinkering with basically every day, so this is just the ranking he's at right now, but that will certainly change as we get closer to the sort of draft period the week before the game launches. But from a point of view of the game, I think as same with Havertz, having him move to a forward is definitely a good thing. The more forwards we can get in the pool is certainly a benefit. And the data is good. He did perform quite well last season. He was hampered by a few injuries, but if he could stay fit for a large majority of the season, then he is going to probably pick up quite a few points and is not a bad player to draft. Next up, we've got Christopher Nkunku from a forward to a midfielder, which I think is really disappointing. I know he's probably more likely than not going to play on the left when he does play for Chelsea, but and how FPL classify the positions, that will mean he will be moving to a midfield role, as they class it. All wingers are midfielders, no matter how high up the pitch they play. It's just a shame, I think, because he would have been really, really useful to have in the forward position. I know last season, obviously pre-injury, a lot of people were drafting him first round, start of the second round, from like that 8 to 15 sort of slot. And I think if he was a forward again this year, and in pre-season he played a lot of minutes under Maresca, he would be in that similar role, because he has got the talent. We know how well he's done in the past. It's just, can he stay fit and do it in the Premier League? I think if he has an injury-free season, he's going to be a really strong pick. I do think he'll probably end up nailing down that left-hand side, because I do think he's better than the likes of Sterling or Madueke or Mudryk. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a front three of Palmer, Jackson and Nkunku if they can all stay fit. Hence why he's currently ranked number 29 in my rankings, which is probably a little bit high, but I think with a full pre-season, hopefully he's completely fit. And as I said, if he was a forward, he'd be even higher than that, but he has gone into that midfield pool. So that does knock him down a little bit, just because there are so many more options in midfield than there are forwards. His data was really strong per 90 last season when he played, but obviously I think he only played about 450 minutes, so it's a small sample size. But 5.96 points from an expected points of 5.62 is strong. 0.62 goals is brilliant from an XG of 0.51. So he did overperform slightly, but it's only a small sample size, as I said. No assists and no XA to speak of, really. So he is going to be, from what we saw last season, was looking for goals and not really creating much, which I've got absolutely no problem with, to be honest, as long as he's taking a lot of shots. So yeah, in conclusion, good pick. As long as he stays fit and as long as he's definitely going to be starting, I've got absolutely no issues with drafting him at all. And I suspect he'll go in sort of the early third to late second round in a lot of leagues. Next up, we've got Timo Werner from a forward to a mid. Similar to Nkunku, it's a bit of a shame. I know he played on the left for the vast majority of his time since he joined Spurs, and very rarely played through the middle. But I think they could have left him as a forward and it wouldn't have really made much difference, because we all know he can play through the middle and has played there a decent amount. And he is probably third choice there, I suppose, behind Son and Richarlison. So yeah, it's a shame really, because as a forward, if he was going to play, he would have been a decent asset. But as a midfielder, with his minutes probably limited between the likes of Brennan Johnson, Richarlison, Son, Kulusevski as well, I'm not convinced he's going to get enough minutes to be a solid pick. But I've kind of hedged my bets. He's ranked at 75, which, if he turns out to not be starting, that's way too high. And if it turns out he is going to be starting, that's probably a little bit low. The data is similar to Nkunku. It's reasonably strong. 5 points per 90 from 5.8 expected points. Underperformed, and you can see where that's come from. 0.22 goals per 90 from an XG of 0.42. We've seen that in his entire career. While he's been in the Premier League, he has always missed a lot of chances, and if he could just sort his finishing out, get his composure right, he could turn into an absolute goal machine, but I don't see it happening, to be honest. 0.44 assists from an XA of 0.32 is pretty strong. So he has been setting up chances, and from that wide area he actually looks better when he's cutting the ball back to the 6-yard box as opposed to driving through to goal, which again is like the opposite of Nkunku. It's not really what you want to see. We'd rather see him going for goals. So he's probably someone I'll avoid drafting unless I can get him in absolute bargain basement territory, and unless we see some minutes from him in pre-season. It looks like he's going to start. If it looks like he's not going to be in the front three, then I want absolutely no part of him, to be honest. And finally, we've got Semenyo. From a forward to a mid, this one's just a heartbreak. I mean, there was absolutely no reason for him to be a forward. He never played through the middle, always played out wide for Bournemouth, really. So I can understand why they've moved him to a midfielder. But in my opinion, this absolutely kills him as a draft fantasy asset. A lot of people would have had him last season in that forward slot, and he did quite well for a lot of people, especially for a little period where he hit some form. So there will be people out there that will, get to the 10th round and think, oh, Semenyo's still free, I'll grab him. To be honest, I think that's probably a mistake. He never really was nailed to start anyway, and I think now his chances of starting are even worse. He's also not got that forward slot. It was quite handy to have him as a third forward because you could bench him unless it kind of seemed like he was going to start, and then you could play him because there was nothing on the waivers in the forwards anyway. So it was quite handy to be able to pick up and drop at the last minute when it looked like he was going to start. I don't think there's any value in doing that this year. There are enough mids about from a lot of the mid-table teams where you can find better options than Semenyo, unless he gets a really solid run in the team. Because one thing about him that I do like is that he just shoots constantly from all sorts of stupid angles, which is very annoying if you own the likes of Solanke or Kluivert. But if you own Semenyo, it's quite exciting because at least he's going to rack up some shots and give himself a chance at some points. The data's not very good though, really. 4.56 points from an expected points of 3.61 per 90 is pretty low. 0.2 xg per 90, he did overperform that a little bit, 0.34, but I think that's mainly due to the amount of pot shots he's taken, the kind of higher variance chances that he gets. 0.17 assists from an XA of 0.09. You know what I mean? The data's not good, even if the minutes were guaranteed. The fact that he's now no longer a forward just absolutely kills him for me. Okay everyone, that wraps up my player position changes. If you want to see the full rankings that I have made so far, then check out my Patreon, the link is down below. And before you ask, yes, I will be doing a full mock draft as I did last season, and with that I will release my rankings, but that won't be for a few weeks. So if you have got an early draft, I would seriously suggest sign up to the Patreon. But not only do we have draft, we've also got some player profiles going out. We're going to have lessons learnt from last season. I've got 2 draft experts helping me with the Patreon content, so there's loads of articles going up. So if you are starting to get obsessed with draft, that is the place to be. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.